Yes, she has some depth and weight. Thank you. Probably lower. Is that okay? Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for sticking around for the Allen honor. When we double fisted, it's usually a Kleenex box in both hands. So that's a different definition of double fisting it. But my hope is that I stay on track. Here comes my sound man. Thank you. So I'm going to give myself permission a couple of things. I'm Desiree, by the way. I think you got that. I'm with Al-Anon. I know I'm probably going to say some things that I shouldn't, and I'll probably not say some things that I should, and I'm giving myself permission to be okay with both of those things. I loved the speakers. They were amazing. I kept hoping they were going to not take my story. There was so much Al-Anon in those AA stories, and it was so fantastic because really I love the pancake from the panel. Flip us over, and there we are. So that was just a wonderful insight into how there's two sides to everything. And I thought when the panel was done that I didn't even need to get up here because you know everything now you need to know about Al-Anon, and I was going to skip this with some of the other commuters. But no, I did stick around. It was great to hear, too, that, we say yes and we do service. That's what we need to do. So when I got the phone call to do this, this is my third time being here with this, and I'm just a local. There's no CDs over there of mine or books you need to have me sign after. I just keep showing up every day, and I try to stay humble, and I appreciate everything that Billy said in his introduction. But I learned that humility is not thinking less of myself. It's thinking of myself less often. So I hope that you hear some of that in what I have to say. Being the Al-Anon speaker at an AA conference is not always that enviable of a position. My friend Larcinia, who I got to hear speak on Zoom, sort of live, she tells a joke about it's like being the corpse at an Irish funeral. Nobody really wants you there, but they can't have the party without you. So I do recognize where I'm coming from and relate to that. So, but what's interesting for me is if you don't like a whole lot about what I have to say tonight, I'm just a reflection of you. I learned recovery from most of the people in this room. And I had the beautiful experience this week of a newcomer. He has maybe 4 months, and I'm not sure how many of those are being sober, to be honest. But he said to me, Desiree, all we do is mirror each other. So you better find a good group of people to mirror. And that hit me hard because I knew I was coming to a group that I try to mirror. And that I've gotten so much from all of you spiritually. So if you don't like it, you can just blame yourself, whatever I say, because I learned it all from you. And I will steal it and take it to my home group as my own come Tuesday night. So thank you for that. So here's what I want to start with is to qualify, is that I've been coming to Al-Anon for 8 years. But I was an untreated Al-Anonic running my own show, Self-Will Run Riot. And you know what? I forgot my big book that says it all. I got to get that. Somebody said I didn't have enough written in it, so I have to keep writing on it. I came for 8 years ago, and I really don't know how my friend got me there. People had tried to get me to Al-Anon for a long time. They knew I needed it. I had gone to a few meetings, especially working in the field. As Billy had mentioned, I've been working with this kind of interesting story. My significant other was a counselor, well, my husband, of whatever decade that was. He didn't last that long. But anyway, he was a counselor in recovery, and he hated it. He couldn't figure out why they couldn't get sober. And so I went to all these trainings with him, and I decided I wanted to do this. So I jumped into counseling, and that was back in 1982. So that was a long time ago that I've been doing this. But I would go when I got burnt out, and people like, you need to go to a meeting. You should try Al-Anon. And I'd try it, thinking I was doing them all a favor by showing up. And that's not going to get you anywhere. And it was 6 years ago when I actually started working a program with a sponsor, as it is in the Big Book. And I do Big Book Al-Anon. And if you have a problem with that, you can talk to Rhonda afterwards. So I do have a pretty rigorous program. I go to Al-Anon regularly. I'm an Alateen sponsor. I have a sponsor. I have sponsees. And I help out with if someone from Al-Anon calls in and the AA person that takes the call can't answer the question, they send them to me. I try very hard to be of service and take phone calls whenever I can. And I host a Zoom group, and I hosted a Zoom group throughout the pandemic. So I do try to work a spiritual program and stay in touch with and keep it current, because that's really important. Now, I don't want to assume that people in this room automatically know what Al-Anon is. There's a lot of rumors out there. We get nicknames. I've been called, part of the Coven of Control, the Sisters of Revenge. So we do have men in our programs. There's a myth there. We have double winners, which we love. I try to go to an open AA meeting on a regular basis and that's how I met many of you in this room, because that's where I get hope, and that's where I met God. I love Al-Anon, don't get me wrong, but there was something going on in AA for me that just clicked. And it opened me up to look at all the qualifiers in my life. And we call them qualifiers out of respect, but those are people suffering with active alcoholism, drug addiction, the isms or the bedevilment still. And, I'm just so grateful for what I saw in open meetings, where I could hear your story and know that that person I loved so much that I had no hope for had hope. And that gave me hope. And I was very grateful for that. And I was very grateful for the patience, and still am, with people as they try to get me to get closer to being on track. So I have a little thing that I wanted to share with you that, that's interactive. I know it's late and you just ate, but, our primary purpose is to help families and friends impacted by this disease. That's what Al-Anonics are all about. And I call us Al-Anonics because it just makes it simpler for me when I identify. And we're like a moth to a flame. You could put, and I heard a few people say that this weekend, put 50 people in a room, one with alcoholism, and that's the one that we're attracted to. I went to a campground conference, walked right by the Al-Anon meeting, and sat down in the AA meeting, didn't even realize it. I mean, it's just an automatic response. So, but I came up with some things. If you're wondering, gee, do I have any of the Al-Anon kind of isms? These are mine in a fun way, so here's the interaction part. So this is like Jeff Foxworthy. So I'm going to say it, and then you're going to say, you might be an Al-Anonic. All right, so I'll give you one for free. And when I point at you, you say, you might be an Al-Anonic. If you can't find a crisis, you create one. You might be an Al-Anonic. Okay, you got the idea. If you're in a room full of paintings and one of them is off center and you have an overwhelming need to straighten it, you might be an Al-Anonic. That just happened to me at a meeting not too long ago. If you have a spring on your backside so you can leap into any crisis, problem, or conversation to provide unsolicited advice, you might be an Al-Anonic. If you have a perfect attendance at your own work but call in regularly with excuses for others, you might be an Al-Anonic. If you tried to force a solution for someone else's problem, you might be an Al-Anonic. If God takes a much-needed day off and leaves you in charge, you might be an Al-Anonic. If you cut out a chapter in the big book, or you take a pamphlet from AA and slide it under your loved one's bedroom door, you might be an Al-Anonic. If you have asked someone in the rooms to be someone else's sponsor, you might be an Al-Anonic. So I have to admit that I was just thinking, 3 years ago I was interviewing young men here to be my son's sponsor. I had some great options for him and phone numbers, of which he has not taken advantage of yet to this day. So I just look at that and think, oh, I've grown. I have grown. So that's good. I've not interfered with any young men here this weekend. If you have, if you wake up and ask the person next to you, how are we feeling today? You might be an Al-Anonic. If your group of friends want to meet for lunch and 2 weeks later you're still trying to decide where you're going to eat, you might be an Al-Anonic. If you ever pose like this, arms on hips, the Al-Anon wave, which is one finger in people's faces, I gotta lift higher, or this, you might be an Al-Anonic. That's the martyr. If you say, well, bless your heart, but what you really want to say, and I'm trying, Billy, not to swear, so I won't say what you really, but you know, you might be Southern, or you might be an Al-Anonic. And this is the one I think I'm probably best known for, unfortunately. If you go to a bar and someone passes out and falls off their stool, and you look down and say, baby, oh baby, you're coming home with me tonight. You might be an Al-Anonic. All right. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how it was, what happened, and how it is. So we're going to go back to my old neighborhood. Now, one of the things I always say going back to the old neighborhood is I don't live there anymore. Thank God. I can visit it, but I don't have to hang out there. So we'll go here gracefully. So as a child, I was shaped by 3 important things: poverty, violence, and alcoholism. And I knew I was in trouble from a young age because I was a bartender before I was a kindergartner. So that's where alcohol fit in our home. Of course, as a child, all that's normal. So I'll share some snippets. You can peek in the windows of my family as we go. The first thing I think of with poverty was we were so poor that for toys, my grandparents would put us into the car and take us to the town dump. And they would tell us, you can have anything here you find. And we jumped out of that. Let me tell you, I had probably the largest amount of dismembered dolls there ever were. But I had lots of them. And I didn't know that wasn't normal. I think I didn't know that wasn't normal until my first husband told me to get my butt back in the car because we had gone to throw stuff away and I was sorting through the dump. He never took me back. He was so embarrassed. But that's, you don't know when you're a kid. That's how poor we were. We lived through the 70s, which many of you in this room did too, where we had, my dad was laid off. I'd come home from school and could ask him what Erica had done on all my children that day, and he could answer that question. So we were standing in line for government cheese, if you remember that. It was tough. That was tough. Violence. My dad beat us with a belt. Now, that wouldn't, probably some of you in the room had that too. But my mother was 4'9". She shrunk to 4'6", and unfortunately, I'm well on my way. I've already lost 1 inch myself. Wish I'd lost it like this, not like this, but it doesn't work that way. So, my dad was 5'10". He had awards for bench pressing. So when my dad hit you, it was an experience. You didn't forget very soon. And we were on a farm, so we were an extended family. My parents were adult children of alcoholics, which means when I looked at them as a kid, they were like in a dark room looking for a light switch they couldn't find. They did not know how to function in society. My grandfather that was maternal was the town drunk. It was really bad. And my mother's shame for that was overwhelming. But he was fun. He was funny. That was my view of alcoholism, was my grandfather was hilarious. My grandmother was the first Al-Anonic I really ran up against. Not funny. She was not funny, but she was a rock and a support for us and really our maternal model in our home. My first full sentence, they told me, was, "Grandma, all you ever do is hotter, hotter, hotter." And she did. She yelled a lot, which didn't do any good for my grandfather. And on the same side, she would make him dandelion wine every summer. And there he'd be sneaking it in the bathroom or down in the basement where they had it. And I didn't quite know how to put those two pieces together. But back to my dad. See how I diverted from that for a second? Okay, so back to my dad. Just, one glimpse of one of the things he did was when I was probably 14, driving the tractor. That was my job, to drive the tractor, which I was not prepared or trained or equipped to do at all. You had to, on this old tractor, put one foot on both brakes. That was really hard to do. My foot slipped, and my brother-in-law was standing right in front of this tractor tire. And luckily, I changed my footing, and I hit that second brake fast enough. It scared him, but it didn't hurt him at all, and he was fine. But my father was irate, and he jumped up behind me on the tractor, and he took me in the back of the head and knocked me right into the steering wheel. Now, I wasn't all that surprised from that. That's how my dad dealt with us kids. But when I come back, the look on my brother-in-law's face, who was not raised in violence and did not know what to do with that at all. And when I saw his look of surprise, I knew this isn't how you should raise a kid. But it's all any of us knew. I was the third child out of 4. And so I had a sister who was 10 years older, my brother who was 8 years older. My mother had several miscarriages. My brother always introduced me as the miscarriage that lived, and then my little sister. And so we were very tight, because when you're brought up in that type of atmosphere, you do become very close. And my older sister is just about the same as my maternal influence, and I'm very grateful for her and what she means in my life. But my paternal grandfather was also alcoholic. We visited them on Sundays, and just a sneak preview on him. This is where I think my parents might have missed the boat on parenting. He would get drunk and say, "Come on, girls." And me and my little sister, quite young, would go out, and it was our job to chase the feral cats out while my drunken grandfather shot them in front of us with a pistol. Now, I didn't know that wasn't normal, but when I had to tell my story and I put that down, I thought, would I ever do that as a mom with my kids? And it was like, the answer was no, I wouldn't. But when you're brought up in that, it's not until you get into these rooms that you start to hear and think about the impact that has on it. So let's fast forward. So there are 4 types of alcoholics as we read in the big book. And that's on page 108, which I wrote down. I don't memorize any of this. I couldn't even remember to bring the big book up here, but I have gone through it. So we don't have those listings for Al-Anon, but I'm pretty sure if we did, I'd be 4, and here's the reasons why. I was born into it, as I explained. I dated and married it a lot. Sick people made me feel well, so I gathered them around me. I had a kind of special recipe for those baby-o-babies on the floor that I would pick up and take home. I like them to drink alcoholically. I also like them to be emotionally unavailable, unpredictable, and unreliable. And so what I formed was reactionships instead of relationships. And I wasn't aware of that until, luckily, I got into the rooms and I started hearing about being emotionally intoxicated, which was my high. So that's how I contributed to the poor loved ones that I formed relationships with was these kinds of reactions all the time. And I lived on a reservation. My first husband was Native American. And so if you've never experienced that, there's only two types of drinking there, extreme or none at all. There's no social. It's those two options. And I remember the first night in our house on the reservation, we were laying flat on the floor looking out the window, watching this very large woman beat the crap out of her alcoholic husband that she had picked up at the party across the street from our house. And I was terrified. I had no idea what I had just gotten myself into, and I was 18 years old. So, I jumped into that a little quick. Anyway, then I chose a career in it. My husband was in recovery himself, and he hated, as I explained already, hated that job. So I took that on, and I loved it. And I've been doing it for a long time. I befriended, which is easy on the golf course, because there's a lot of drinking that goes on there. But guaranteed, if I'm attracted to someone and we become besties, guaranteed that there are a six-pack on the front nine and a six-pack on the back nine. I gave birth to it. And I am grateful to say that I was 2 years in Al-Anon when my son got sober. And I was at a women's conference when it happened. And thank God, because I would have been all over that and I would have screwed that up completely. It was funny. It's funny now, my son said to me, and I shared this with some people at the table, Mama, you never said anything. I wasn't, I'm surprised. You think I'm an alcoholic because you never said anything. I'm like, how drunk were you? I never shut up about your drinking, nonstop. But anyway, he got in some trouble. He got some treatment. The light bulb went on, and it had nothing to do with me at all. There's nothing more powerless when you're an alcohol and drug counselor and you can't save your own child. And someone in the rooms gave me a wonderful saying that just took that guilt away from me. And it was, we can't save our own kids, so we give them to you. And when we have a newcomer come in and they're young and they're somebody else's kid, that's how I look at them. That's my son. And I hope that people, I try to be that person in the gap for them, like people have been in the gap for my son. My daughter, about a year ago, said, I'm done drinking. I'm done. I only get in trouble when I drink. I would not have ever thought that she had a physical need for alcohol, but she was able to identify that there's a problem here. And they both gave me permission to share that much of their stories, and they've both been texting me saying, Mom, you got this. So, sorry, if I talk about them, I get emotional, but I'm not going to do that. I'm very proud of them and what they've done. So, in Al-Anon, we talk about the 3 C's: can't cause it, can't cure it, and we definitely can't control it. But I have definitely contributed to it. I'm the bank of mom. That was my best way to control. And I have to catch myself even now not to do that. The big book talks about on page XX5, that frothy emotional appeal does not work. And I have definitely been frothy at several people. And I've learned that that's not going to work. So those are the reasons I see myself as being an Al-Anonic. I learned from someone else's story that I can also talk about good things I've done. That's pretty exciting because I didn't know that. I thought I was just to be up here crying mess, and this is how crazy my life was. But during all that craziness, I was able to get my bachelor's degree. I have a great career as a drug court coordinator and domestic violence coordinator because drug court just wasn't enough. I needed a little more drama than that. Uh, I have two fantastic kids. One works with traumatically brain injured, which I think I probably had a large part in preparing her for that. And my son is going to be helping troubled teenagers. And that's a wonderful experience. You know, I have 4 grandchildren, and they are all amazing, and that could take a full hour, so I won't talk about that because Bill told me I only had 3 hours to tell my story. No, just kidding. On and on. I know, sorry. I have a wonderful fiance, and this is how wonderful he is. So we met just as I was coming back in to the rooms, which I'll tell you about in a minute, but he just loves what Al-Anon and Open AA meetings does for me. So he's standing at the door with $1 in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other and escorting me out to the door to get in the car and go. He never stands in my way of being in the rooms and being a part of all of this, for which I'm very grateful. He worries sometimes about what I say about him. So if this is recorded, I don't know, am I being recorded? He may find out, but he's wonderful. So there you go. He's wonderful. He's a norm. I've told people that he's boring, and I don't mean that as an insult. A good friend of mine in the room said to me when I said, "Oh man, he's so boring." I mean, I could tell you what he's doing right now. The Mets are on. He's definitely doing that. But when I pull in my driveway and I open that front door, I know what I'm going to see and what I can expect. I never had that in my life. I didn't have that as a kid. I didn't have that in any of my other marriages, and I've got that now, and that is something. I deserve that level of boredom. So I told you about creating crisis. My kids used to say to me all the time, "Mom, if you lose your job, you can create your own business with 1-800-CREATE-A-CRISIS." So I go to his family functions, and I'm sitting there waiting, right? I'm waiting. They're Irish. Something's got to go down. Nothing ever goes down. They are so normal, and I can't explain it. I look at him with his daughter, my stepdaughter, who is a beautiful young woman. Another person, you can predict how she behaves. We let her stay at our house, and we didn't need 1-800 steam cleaners to come in after. I don't know what that looks like. I used to come home when I'd left my adult kids in my house, and we'd play What Did They Break Now? Or Who Threw Up Where? It was very different. And she's just such a wonderful girl. So I have so many wonderful things in my life, despite all of the self-sabotage in my active Al-Anonism that I was doing. So how did I get to Al-Anon through all of that? Well, I went to Al-Anon, like I said, years ago, thinking I was doing them a favor. But the minute it got close, it got personal, I just wanted to run. And I am a cut and run kind of person. I don't want it to get that close. And so I didn't stay with it. Then I went 8 years ago, and my friend got me there. I had just gone through yet another horrible breakup with someone whose drug of choice was opiates. And I had no idea, none at all, that they were addicted, you know. And my kids are like going, you know, right over her head. They knew from almost the minute that they met him that there was something there. So in desperation, here's what the difference was this time, is I couldn't blame it on anybody else anymore. This was my parade of failed relationships, and it was a parade. You know the joke, like, what does a blonde say after sex? Are you boys all on the same team? Or so how many partners have you had? Is it less than a football team? And I'm like, well, it's definitely less than a football stadium. So, I mean, you can fill in the gaps, and I blamed it all on them. The bad picker, I had a bad picker. It was me. It was all me, and the only one that was going to change that was me. It was time to look at what was happening in my life. I earned the chair in Al-Anon, and I cried for 4 months straight while I was in there. But everyone was fantastic to me. I think the first thing I learned when I was there was there is no other shoe. And I don't know if any of you, because, let's be honest, this is a family disease. Probably some of you grew up in alcoholism just like I did. If you're working with sponsees, you definitely know what it's like to try and change an alcoholic or their thinking. So you have some idea of what I'm talking about. And when I first came in, like I said, I did everything my way. So some of the things was I got a spiritual mentor, not a sponsor. I didn't work the steps because that's like a little over the top. I don't need to do that. And I would come early and leave late, which my friend Skip does not agree with. He frowns on that, and has taught me that that's not how you're supposed to work a program. I didn't know that then. But in those 2 years I was there, seed was planted. And so 6.5 years ago, 2 very important things happened. One was I got in trouble at work. So, I know you guys have much more interesting stories about getting in trouble at work, like not showing up or showing up drunk or, ours aren't quite that exciting. But where we get in trouble is here's my hula hoop, and I was way out of it. I was in somebody else's business, and it was so bad. And I won't go into a lot of details on it, but I was disciplined by a panel. Now, if you're a perfectionist like I was, you don't get in trouble at work. My nickname was Hoover. I made everybody happy and sucked up and did what I was supposed to. So getting in trouble at work was a huge deal for me. And I had to go in front of a panel and explain what I had done and why. And so that was bad. The second thing that happened to get me back is my friend Skip. So he's pushing, just a little nudge. Kept nudging me. They have a combined meeting. You should really check it out. There's some great ladies from Al-Anon, and he got me back there, and I just jumped right in with those ladies, and I've been with them ever since. And it had to be different this time. I knew that I needed a sponsor, so I overheard someone talking about, well, if you want me for a sponsor, you need to know that you're going to have to do a lot of writing. And so I knew that's something I wanted to do. I wanted to dig deep. So she didn't lie about that. It was a lot of writing. And I did what she told me to do. So when you have an ego the size of Texas, you need a sponsor that's able to push back against that. I remember telling her several times that I have this great idea, blah, blah, this is how I'm going to do steps 1, 2, and 3, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, no, we're not going to do it that way. She was very kind, but she was very good also at redirecting. I want to read this from the big book because I think it's an important reminder, is that we wives found that, like everybody else, we were afflicted with pride, self-pity, vanity, and all the things which go to make up the self-centered person. What? No. I am selfless. I give up everything to take care of you. That just knocked me over when I read that. And we were not above selfishness or dishonesty. As our husbands began to apply spiritual principles in their lives, we began to see the desirability of doing that too. I don't know where I was supposed to learn about the steps or about any of the traditions or anything that I was supposed to do unless I was open to really diving into the program and having a guide. I need adult supervision, and she was wonderful adult supervision for that. Now, the problem that I got into early on with someone telling me exactly what to do and how to do it was I relied more on my sponsor and that lineage than God. In Al-Anon, we call those pyramid schemes. They're pyramids, where you have this sponsor, has a sponsor, has a sponsor, has a sponsor. What was cool about that was that I could track my lineage back to Lois. Yeah, well, that does nothing for what I just read here about ego, because us Al-Anons have that too. So I would go to local meetings and be like, they're not doing it right. You know, I can barely relate to these people because I had a direct lineage to Lois. So that started to crumble, and what happened was, and this is hard for me to talk about, and I'm going to do it spiritually because I have worked very spiritually on what happened. I have seen Al-Anon relapses, but never experienced one personally. And my sponsor one day, virtually, pulled her car over and told us all to get out. So there were sponsees and my sponsees, and we were dropped off on the side of the road, and she kept driving. And I didn't know what to do with that because I was tied. I mean, that was my recovery, and that was my recovery driving away. So I had to learn something new, and that was what I would call frog recovery, which is fully rely on God. And so, you have a choice of collapsing or reaching out. That lineage left on the side of the road, we had some strong recovery. And a lot of that was because of that strong woman who needed right then to drive off. And I love and appreciate that because that's a choice. And she taught me that any of us are just one bad thought away from doing that very thing. And so I have to be on top of my thinking. So off she went, and I reached out for a new sponsor. I relied on those other women. We had a bond and still have a very strong bond today. We pray for that person to come back or to find their own way in whatever way they need and to let that go. So I got a new sponsor, and she was exactly what I needed. I do want to say a little thing about my spiritual work. I loved what was said about, if you only knew me back then, if you really knew me, you'd see how great I am today. This window right here, I did not manage that. I wasn't standing on the side of the road waving, love you. No, it was not that. And I made some phone calls because I knew this is a crisis. And some of you have been there where you've had a sponsor that didn't make it, or you had someone close to you in the rooms, or a sponsee. It's heartbreaking to watch that happen. And I had to call someone in the rooms, and they didn't co-sign my BS. They pushed back hard on me that this is a chance for me to do some real work. And I had to do a lot of writing. I found the letter I wrote to that person the other day, and it was, I have come a long way. And I'm very grateful that God shows up in big ways. I don't have to make my God small. My God is big. And he showed up for me and kept me where I was at. So, like I said, my new sponsor recently had a commitment ceremony and invited me to that. I'm not a big fan of institutions. I hope that in my story, I didn't injure any of my ex-husbands, because I definitely don't want to do that. That's not what I'm up here for. Their story's their story, and this is my story tonight. So I'm not, going to be a part of that. But when I fully rely on God, God does some amazing things. I had to do some work where, I got a sponsor that knew exactly what I was going through and exactly how to deal with that, and to teach me reliance on God. When she finished her 12 steps, her sponsor's like, now go serve, now go do what you need to do. You don't need to be calling me all the time. I'm here if you need me, but I'm not going to be hanging over you. That was huge in my life, to have someone that was going to let me rely on God instead of be told what to do. And that's my part in that story. Apparently, I really liked that. I really loved to be told what to do. And maybe at that point, that's exactly what I needed. But how is it now? So that's how it was. What happened? How is it now? Hang on just a second. I skipped a page. So I said how great that was. Oh, what I wanted to say about that celebration, that commitment ceremony, usually people don't invite me to weddings because I show up in black and a veil, and for a gift I buy them a attorney retainer for their divorce, so I'm often not invited, and my sponsor's like, calm down, I'm not really marrying him. We're doing a commitment ceremony. I'm like, okay, I can do that. But as I sat there, it's similar to sitting here. It's a room of like-minded people. And there was a feeling of unconditional love. You give a kid that was broken unconditional love, you'll never get rid of them. It's like feeding a dog or a cat. They just keep coming back wanting more of that. When I told my story the first time, my sponsor said to me, you know what I like most about when you told your stories? How much the people listening loved on you. That group loves you. And she really wanted me to hear that. And that was beautiful and exactly what I needed to hear. That heals us. Some of you have wounded kids too in you. I love this slogan that says, I have a child acting up in my back seat, but they're not driving the car. And I have to remind myself that I show up as a 58-year-old, not an 8-year-old. And if I show up as an 8-year-old, I've got some work to do. During the pandemic, we got a little extra money that I didn't expect, and so I took that and I paid for a life coach because I knew that childhood crap in the back seat kept jumping into the front and knocking me out of the way. It was dangerous. So this life coach was amazing, and here's why I chose her. I chose her because she was a huge proponent for Al-Anon, and she went right after the childhood issues. And it was amazing. The meditation, which Billy knows how much I love meditation. My brain is always like, you know, I was thinking I'm alone up here, but like the other speaker said, I still have a panel going on. That's just how this is. But they did meditation, and it went after that wounded inner child, and it helped me heal some things so that when it came time to do my step work, when it came time to make amends for being a crappy daughter, for being a crappy wife, for being a crappy mom, I could do it and do it in love. And I have some amazing stories connected to that for me. And I'll just share one of my 9 step. I have a brother who is active with chemicals and bipolar, and very bipolar. And he and I do not mix. He takes credit all the time for why I'm in the addiction field was him. In fact, I had so many alcoholics and drug addicts in my life, they were kind of arguing who was responsible for me going to Al-Anon. That's not a good thing to have in your life. But for amends to him, I judged him horrible. I just judged him. I did not respect him. So I knew I had to do something creative, because to try and apologize to someone who introduces you as the miscarriage that lived takes some creativity. So instead of just sitting down and doing an apology and an index card and all of that, he wrote poems. And he put them on Facebook. And I would be like, like they just were so annoying. And there wasn't poetry that was like, I stood at the window and looked out and saw the green of the grass and the blue of the sky. It was rhyming poems, you know, and so whatever. And he wrote one a day, so there were hundreds. So I spent 4 hours because I was, and still obviously I have a little bit going on there. That's what comes out when you do this. When you speak, I'm sorry, but all your stuff comes flying out like monkeys on The Wizard of Oz, and you're like, oh crap, I thought I worked that out. Well, I guess I didn't. Anyway, I spent 4 hours gathering all those poems, printing them out, putting them together, sending them into one of those chat books, and I made an 80-page poetry book for him. And so we gathered at a family get-together. He was saying snotty stuff to me as always, and I'm just loving him. That's my job now, is to love on him. And I gave him that book, and he opened it, and he started crying. I've never seen my brother do that. And he said, I have nothing to say. I'm blown away. And that was my best amends, because I didn't expect that reaction. And it truly was totally God-led. I wouldn't have come up on that on my own. And that's some of the beautiful stuff when we actually do the work, not just show up at a meeting, but we do the stuff we're supposed to do that God calls us to work on and do together. So that was one of the biggest things that I worked on. Tradition 5 has really been talking to me recently, and that's some of the current work that I'm doing. So, of course, our Al-Anon Tradition 5 is a tad longer than yours. Go figure, the On-and-Ons. But I'll read it to you because it's really hit me lately. I want to live this. Each Al-Anon family group has but one purpose: to help families of alcoholics. We do this by practicing the 12 steps of AA ourselves, by encouraging and understanding our alcoholic relatives, and by welcoming and giving comfort to families of alcoholics. That means reaching up, reaching in, and reaching out. So if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing for my recovery, that's action words. That's not sitting. That's work. That's action work. So how do I do that? Well, I learned about the steps by coming to an open big book meeting. And I am forever grateful for what I learned there from the experts. And I had a lot to learn, and I think it floored me. I've read the big book before, but every time we reread something, I learned something new. And I'm just blown away by the stuff that I learned in this. I remember being so ticked off the first time we went through to the wives. And the last place you want to be when you have a true Al-Anon meltdown is in a room full of AAs. I was furious, but God bless, this is a truth. My sponsee went through the exact same thing, and I was there for her because I had been there myself when that hit me. And it says, living of years, well, this is the family afterward, but the shirt I have on actually says a lot of where I come from. My sponsee got it for me, but I'm a tornado chaser. That's how it's described in the big book, is that people with alcoholism are like tornadoes, just roaring through the lives of other people. And then they come out of the cellar and say, nothing to see here, Ma. Isn't it a beautiful day? And so when we went through this, I got in touch with a lot of stuff that I hadn't seen before. And it says years of living with an alcoholic is almost sure to make any wife or child neurotic. The entire family is to some extent ill. But here's what I learned that came before that. All members of the family should meet upon the common ground of tolerance, understanding, and love. And that's what our tradition in Al-Anon teaches us, is to bring encouragement and understanding, not nagging, not preaching, not frothy appeal. I had tried all those things. The greatest gift I got in Al-Anon is I was allowed to love my son again. I hated him. I hated what his alcoholism was doing to us. And I only knew half of it. It hasn't been until he's gotten recovery where he sat me down and said, well, there's probably a little more you need to know. I'm like, I don't want it. I don't want to hear it. I found under his bed probably a month, and I'm probably being generous, a month worth of handles is what he called them. He drank a handle of vodka. And I have no idea how many of those he went through, but he had DTs when he got into recovery. And he was in his 20s. He drank himself almost to death very, very quickly. And as I had mentioned to you, I was at a conference, and one of the first phone calls I made was to Billy because I knew Billy knew the way. And so I called Billy, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And Billy's like, look at your feet and where you are. You take care of you. You are right where you need to be. You're in an Al-Anon conference. And somehow I got through that with the love of the women that were there. I love this thing that I got from a friend that says, damn your old meetings, and it was Lois. And she got so mad at her husband for going to AA all the time that she threw a shoe at him. I would love for my son to come to the rooms. And I tried to force that solution on him. Like I said, I was shopping for sponsors for him. He did come and hear a speaker, and he really liked that. But, you know, I have learned that their recovery comes in all different ways, and it's not for me to prescribe what that is. Like I tell everybody, yeah, he's got recovery, but he's not doing it right. Of course, I would say that about anyone because that's what we do. You know, we have very high expectations, and we think we know better. And I've come to learn, and I've come to appreciate that in other people too, and stop taking inventory so much. You know, I have created a new neighborhood. For that, I am so grateful. You are part of that neighborhood. I get to go to my sponsor's commitment ceremony and experience love that I have never seen before between people. I get to see men hug, not fight, and for that, I'm grateful. I've seen changes in my family that I believe are a ripple effect, and I don't believe it was me. I believe it started with God and people that loved me and got me to where I needed to be, and then God did the same for them, and I'm forever grateful for that. So I wasn't even here 30 minutes, and someone came up to me and said, you know, I go to AA to learn how to live, but I go to Al-Anon to learn how to love. And I thought that was so amazing, and that is the gift that Al-Anon has given to me, and I hope that you heard some of that in what I had to say tonight. Thank you.